Hello, welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the Monday show with me, Andrew Musgrove, and I'm joined by Mark Crothers. As always, a huge shout out to our sponsor, NordVPN, the only sign up you need this Christmas to keep all your new devices safe, whether you're on unfamiliar Wi Fi or going abroad and wanting to keep up to date with all your favourite UK TV shows. We've got a discount offer in the podcast description box, so click that, support the podcast at the same time, and get signed up. Mark and myself are here to reflect on Newcastle's 2-2 draw with Chelsea, the failure of VAR, the stunning first half performance from Newcastle United, and a subsequent second half collapse, plus much more. Mark, you well? You good?
I'm here. It was a 3-game working weekend on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so which is why I look like this. People will be grateful if they're listening to the audio of this, I've no doubt, on the various podcast outlets. But yeah, it was a busy weekend, a cold weekend as well. Spent most of it outside, which was different and very cold. But yeah, all good.
Because you cover a lot of non-league. Obviously, we know that you cover the youth games as well. The key question is that people will be wondering, fingerless gloves, Mark? Or we've got those nice touch ones now?
Do you know what, mate? Honestly, this is something I've been trying to get myself around to doing in recent months, which is to buy some. And no gloves, just go right at it. I know it's crazy. It's something I've thought about for ages. I did take gloves with us to Gateshead yesterday. But yeah, not the fingerless ones. So I had to take them off the tape anyway. So yeah, schoolboy era.
That's where the fingerless gloves come into good use. You get them in a certain sport wear outlet that we shall not mention. But I did laugh to myself when I saw Johan Wissa coming off the bench to be wearing a short sleeve. Is that your dog in the background? Is he just wandered in?
It is my dog. Yeah, just see what's going on.
Fantastic. Well, at least we've got one viewer. But yeah, I did laugh to myself when I saw Johan Wissa coming off the bench the other day. And he had a short sleeved shirt on with the underlay and then gloves. I feel like, you've got to do one or the other.
If we ever do like a Newcastle United room 101 or football 101, room 101, that's one of my things. Gloves with short sleeves. Don't get it.
Well, regular viewers and listeners will know that we did do a show, me and Sam Mulner, series called Get in the Bin. So maybe we could bring it back and we could throw that one in. And to the person who said, do not try with patter after the last one, there it is. 3.5 minutes of great patter.
3.5 minutes of patter.
Goodness me, so much to talk about with this game on Saturday. I mean, if you were neutral, you absolutely loved that game. It had everything about it. It pretty much actually had the whole drama of Saturday because the rest of the Premier League games weren't much to write home about. But I would rather have taken a boring 1-0 win from Newcastle United, truth be told. First half, best we've seen from Newcastle United, especially in the second half of 2025. And a 20-minute period where they were flat as soon as the second half started. And of course, we had the failure of VAR, stole the headlines. I have to say, I think it was probably the worst performance by VAR since it was implemented. A game of twists and turns. So, Mark, just briefly sum up your initial conclusion from that game before we dive in deeper.
So I thought that the first half performance was the best since the Carabao Cup final. I thought the words we use for Eddie Howe's Newcastle, what we like to see, the intensity, the energy, but also the quality on the ball. I think there's a lot being made of how Newcastle have been lacking intensity, but I do also think they've been lacking that quality in possession and that sort of work rate out of possession as well. But that all came together. Look, I think 2-0 kind of flattered Chelsea to an extent. I was really, really delighted to see Nick Faltamata getting back on the score sheet again and 2 good finishes. I think we can all say should have had a hat-trick as well. The chance that he missed where he's flicked one wide, he should really take that. But I think the biggest thing, 2 biggest things, one won't surprise you, to take away from the first half. Firstly, Anthony Gordon looking back to the Anthony Gordon we know and love. And secondly, can we do a podcast on his own for Lewis Miley at some point? Because just a brilliant performance. Bizarrely, but brilliantly compared to Paolo Maldini on TNT Sports coverage of the game. I think it was Joe Cool said that. But yeah, just a great performance. Second half, frustrating, the goals to give away, really bad goals, both of them. I thought even though the free kick was brilliant, I think the free kick award was completely avoidable. And then it's VAR, isn't it? Steals the show, unfortunately. Which, yeah, just a frustrating day, but also one where there were positives. So it's kind of one of those mixed emotions.
And that was Mark, ladies and gents, being brief.
That was brief.
It was brief. But get on to all those points. We have to start with VAR. And I thought about jumping on Saturday after the game and sharing my initial thoughts. And then I just decided against it because I was so furious. I didn't want to be too emotional about it. But even after a couple of days, I'm still really, really angry. And look, we can talk about Newcastle's poor restart. We can talk about some of the in-game management decisions and the failure not to hold on to yet another lead. But we can't hide away from the failure of VAR in this game and the impact it's had on the outcome. And once again, Mark, I'm sat here asking, what is the point of VAR? And I'm sick of asking that question because the technology is there and it's brilliant technology. And we really should never have to question what is the point of VAR because they should be getting it right. But as I said, I think this was arguably the worst 90 minutes of VAR across the entirety of the Premier League since it came into play. And you couple that with the shocking performance of Andy Madley on the pitch because he had a terrible afternoon before we even start talking about VAR. But it has cost Newcastle United a valuable 3 points. So let's go through the key talking points when it comes to VAR on Saturday afternoon. Firstly, we've got the challenge from Garnacho on Jacob Ramsey just before the half-hour mark. It's a high foot, no attempt to play the ball, and it studs right down the shin. The referee awards a yellow card. Now, these sort of challenges, I'm a little bit in between. I do think there's an argument to say you can just miss the ball. It's not intentional. It is a nasty challenge, but my anger really comes from what we've seen come before that challenge, i.e. across the entirety of the season, and what's come after the Spurs-Liverpool game on the Sunday. Or was it the Saturday? I can't remember what. It was the Saturday evening, wasn't it?
Saturday.
We saw Xavi Simons get sent off. VAR intervened to get that dismissal, right? Very similar challenge. And I think the game is gone. It's not even about whether it's a red card. It's about the consistency. If VAR is given that as a red card against Van Dijk, then it has to give that challenge of Garnacho on Ramsey a red card. And that's the issue. It's the lack of consistency. So 2 questions, Mark. Firstly, was Garnacho's challenge on Jacob Ramsey a red card? And secondly, the issue of consistency. What's the solution?
There isn't one other than the referees actually singing off the same hymn sheet, but I feel as if every single referee, and I know you've kind of got to have your own style of referee, it'd be boring if they were all the same, but to have a consistency in approach, they just have to work together more. And I know there's a lot going on with PGMOL and how they do work together. And we've seen bits of sort of Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher doing bits with the referees, going through the coaching process, which was an interesting watch for nerds like me. But I think in terms of the challenge, for me, I think it's one of those where if Madley gives a red, VAR doesn't overturn it, but maybe somehow hasn't seen enough to overturn or to upgrade it, to a red or downgrade. I'm sure it would be classed as. But for me, I think I can see why I only give a yellow at first sight, because this action's taken place at 90 mile an hour. It's full force. So maybe initially he's judged it as what you said there, that he's gone for the ball. He's missed it, admittedly, by quite some distance. And then VAR has thought there's not enough in that. The thing is, and we talk about VAR a lot, and at the end of the day, it still comes down to human decision. It's still a human call. It's still someone, admittedly, with far more sort of camera angles to work on. But I think that one was just about correct. But I agree with the what you're saying about the consistency. But I think the one difference, I think maybe the one later on the Spurs game, was that it was kind of down the heel, which, it kind of looked a bit more malicious, and it didn't look like he was going for the ball. So maybe that's the difference there. But Yeah, I think this one was just, I mean, and I do mean just about correct.
Let us know in the comments your thoughts on that challenge on Ramsey. We've then got the tackle on Anthony Gordon by Trevor Shaballar in the second half with the score at 2-1. In real time from the Melbourne stand, it looked like a penalty and the replays confirmed it. Now, you can, as Mark's alluded to there, afford the referee a tiny bit of leniency because these incidences are happening at breakneck speed so fast. But this is where VAR really needs to be the safety net that it's implemented, or it's said to be, because it seems as if they're scared to get the right decision, to get there, to correct the referee. Now, the answer given to why this wasn't a penalty is said to be it was side to side in a shielding action and the ball within playing distance, which is absolutely ludicrous because he's nowhere near the ball. He's got no intention of shielding the ball. He's got every intention of just wiping Anthony Gordon out. It's a terrible, terrible decision. And once again, VAR is letting down not just football fans, not just Newcastle United, not just the team that decision's gone against, but the referee as well, because he's been made to look like an absolute wally.
I 100% get why he didn't give it in normal time, because these situations happen all the time, don't they? Where I'll say this carefully, where a defender eases a striker or forward out of play to win a goal kick. My issue with it, one of many issues with this kind of situation, was the initial contact isn't shoulder to shoulder, and that's been largely overlooked. The initial contact was knee to knee. And if you go back and watch it, and I've watched it a few times, well, too many times now, the initial contact is knee on knee, which is a foul. It's not shoulder to shoulder. It's not the old shoulder charge, whatever you want to class it as. But for the life of me, I can't figure out how the VAR official has looked at this for a long, long time. Well, actually, it wasn't a long time, was it? Let's be honest. Looked at it for quite a short time in the end, and has still come to the conclusion that it's not a foul. I just, it's the force of the challenge. It's a little bit reckless, if I'm honest, the way he's gone in, Chalobah. And I look at every angle that VAR was shown, and I'm yet to see one where I go, actually, I kind of get why they didn't give that. Like, it's beyond belief. And I hate to say it, I wonder if some part of it is, you know, Gordon sometimes can go down quite easily, but there's no doubt that he hasn't gone down easily here. He's gone down and been hurt.
It's a Stonewall penalty.
Oh,
Everybody
100%.
is saying it. Every pundit. You got Mike Dean on Sky Sports saying it as well. And yeah, we just look at it and it's total bemusement. Alan Shearer has been bemused as the rest of us as well. And you're just left scratching your head. And look, VAR, they want to give the referees the benefit of the doubt. They don't want to be refereeing the game from hundreds of miles away. But the failure to intervene is just having a detrimental impact. And I'm now talking about the game as a whole, not just this example, but the game as a whole. And it might sound daft to people watching, to you, Mark, and come back at me if you disagree. But I think they now need to send the referee to the screen every single time. I know it would be time consuming and we would be adding loads of minutes onto the 90 minutes they're meant to play. But we're already down that path anyway. You know, it takes far too long with these decisions. So why not take a little bit extra time to get the right decision? And look, there's a few reasons why I think they should start doing this, because it gives the referee the chance to make the final call, which is what they want at the end of the day. But also it removes the inevitability every time they send a referee to the screen these days, because you know exactly what's going to happen. I think you can probably count on one hand the amount of times the referee's gone to that screen and gone, no, I'm sticking with my decision. I don't think we're in double figures at all. You know what is happening every time he's called over to the touchline. So it removes that, because if he has to go over every single time, not every single time he's going to agree with the decision of Stockley Park. Like I said, we're already down the path of wasting our lives waiting for decisions when it comes to VAR. So take a little bit extra time, send them to the screen every time, and let him make the right decision. Because I have no doubt if Andy Madley watches that on a TV screen at all the angles we're afforded afterwards, then he's given that as a penalty. And we're not calling them out for a poor decision. We're not calling VAR for a poor decision, because ultimately they get to the right decision.
You know how you talked about consistency earlier? The one consistent thing I've seen over the weekend is former referees, Premier League, FIFA referees. I think I've seen 4 now. And I've got mates who are referees, albeit at sort of non-league level, and some who are in sort of the EFL. And I'm yet to see one who said it's not a penalty. They all say it should have been given, whether on field or via VAR. It should have been a penalty, and I think that sums it up.
Yeah, it's an absolutely ridiculous decision, Mark. But again, that's why I think now they have to just start sending the referee to the screen every single time. Because I do think, as I said, I think Andy Madley will come to the decision that we all come to, and that it's a penalty. And look, it changes the outcome of the game. It's 2-1. Newcastle have started really flat. And we will talk about decisions in game later in the show. But games turn on these moments. And that is a moment Newcastle get the penalty. Anthony Gordon scores it, and I think they go on to win the game.
Yeah, I agree. It's another kind of defining moment. It's not a potentially defining moment. I think if Newcastle get that penalty, if it's scored, there's a lot of ifs here. I do think they go on and win the game, because I think they would have regained some momentum lost, some confidence maybe lost after Chelsea came back into it. But it's just so disappointing and so frustrating that these decisions are having such a major impact on Premier League games, not even just Newcastle games, but on Premier League games. We've seen it across the whole season, where there are literally jobs. It sounds dramatic, this, by the way, but there are jobs being put in jeopardy by poor decision making from referees, from those at Stockley Park in the VAR studio. I'm sorry, I keep going back. I just can't see how any referee at any level of the game can look at that and say it's not a penalty, unless the Chelsea fans maybe, but obviously these ones aren't. Not accusing them of that, but it's just bewildering. It's absolutely bewildering that anyone could look at that and say it's not a penalty.
Yep, and we had a couple more instances that we'll talk about. We had a handball call as Nick Voldemort backheeled it. It hit Wesley Fofana's hand. No doubt it hits his hand. I don't think this is as much as a penalty as a lot of people are making it out to be. I think his hand is in slightly in an unnatural position, but I don't think it's too far out for it to be called a penalty kick.
Probably proximity to the ball as well, wasn't it? He was quite close to Voldemort. I think that one would have been very harsh. The only thing I will say, just to play a bit of devil's advocate, I have seen them given this season, which probably goes back to the consistency discussion. But yeah, that one, not for me.
Well, people will be shouting at the screen now, because I've gone on for many years about if it hits your hand in the box, it should just be a penalty. But given that's not the rule, that's why I'm applying that logic to Fofana. Now, what about Reece James's last-ditch challenge on Harvey Barnes? I'm not talking about the pullback in the dying moments, because that is clear as anything, but rather Barnes running through 77 minutes on the clock. Reece James is last man. And in real time, I thought that this was a superb bit of defending. I really, really did. I thought it was a great challenge. But having watched it back, I don't think he gets the ball at all. He comes across Barnes. It's not given as a corner, because if he gets a touch on it, it's a corner. So surely that also suggests he doesn't get the ball. I think it's an absolute terrible challenge upon reflection, and a Stonewall penalty for me. But this doesn't seem to be getting as much attention as the Anthony Gordon one.
Which probably says more about the Gordon challenge than anything else, the fact that was such a blatant error. But no, I can only 100% agree with everything you said there, because when I initially saw the challenge, my first instinct was, wow, what a piece of defending that is, from a very, very good fullback. And then look back, particularly when it was slowed down, and I know things always look bad when they're slowed down or look worse. And I just thought, that is a penalty. It is a penalty. He's taken man before ball, if he got any of the ball, and then you look at it again and you go, no, hang on, they're giving a goal kick, so clearly he hasn't got any of the ball. So it's for me, that one, again, not surprised it wasn't given on field, but again, I'm surprised it wasn't after VAR.
Now, with the Anthony Gordon challenge, we have to apply the clear and obvious rule. Everyone is in agreement that it was a penalty, but let's give those using VR the benefit of the doubt and say shoulder to shoulder, they think it's not clear and obvious for that exact reason. Or as they said, side by side, a protecting action. I can't understand why the clear and obvious logic was applied to the Reece James challenge and Harvey Barnes, and see why they've come out with that outcome, because there is nobody gets the ball. He comes across the player. If you're VAR, Mark, and you're looking at that and you're looking to apply that clear and obvious rule, what are you seeing that allows you to say the referee hasn't made a clear and obvious mistake?
I literally can't give you an answer to that because everything that I saw on the replays, whether at full pace or slowed down, suggested to me that maybe it should have been given as a penalty. The fact, as you say, that it was given as a goal kick suggests there wasn't contact with the ball. If they're trying to say shoulder to shoulder, it's not. Another reason one, not as obvious, I think, as the Gordon one, but that again speaks more about the Gordon challenge than the one on Bonds. So, yeah, just again bewildering, but has been completely overshadowed by what preceded it.
I'll be honest, I think that's maybe more of a penalty than the Anthony Gordon one. I think they're both stonewall penalties, without a doubt.
I think there's there's an argument to say that, but I mean, I look at the Gordon one, and I think, with the one on Bonds, you could maybe say that you thought that before it goes to VAR, I shouldn't say that there was contact on the ball, but with the Gordon one, I just thought straight away that was a penalty. But I mean, either way, if Newcastle been given 2 penalties on Saturday, I'm not really sure Chelsea could have complained.
I presented one solution for VAR. The other one, Mark, scrap it entirely until they can get it right. We're talking about them messing up far too often, and it's clear that the people using it can't use it correctly. If they can't get the best out of it and it's distracting from football matches, just get rid of it and practice in youth games. And I know that would be a costly investment because you've got to put all the equipment in and all that. But long term, you'd get the benefit out of it. Take 18 months, take 3 or 4 years to just really nail down the practice of using VAR correctly, and then bring it back to top flight football when you know that 9 times out of 10, in fact, scrap that, 10 times out of 10, you're going to get it right. If you're not going to change the rules where you get involved every single time, then scrap it until you can get it right on the decisions that you are allowing yourself to use it for.
I suppose they would say that because they've gone with the on-field decision, they've made the referees made the correct decision. So whether VAR's there or not, they're not going to give a penalty, which is, again, really frustrating. But at the same time, I find the whole officiating across the Premier League this season just bemusing. Just there's so many inaccuracies, and as you said earlier, we spoke about it. The word we've used more than any other probably is consistency or lack of. It's just another example of that across the whole game. I mean, Madley, I've never really rated as a referee anyway. I try not to make these things personal, but I find myself consistently, again, I've used that word again, when I watch his games, just confused by the decisions that he makes at times. And Saturday has done nothing to change my outlook on him as an official or the VAR process. Look, I think VAR can work. I think it can work, but at the end of the day, we shouldn't forget that it still comes down to human decision. There's nothing technological about it. There's nothing automated about it. It still comes down to someone. It's like me and you watching a game and giving a verdict on it at the end of the day. You might say, "Oh, Newcastle played really well." I might say, "Well, I thought they were quite poor." It's down to human decision or human verdict, and it's infuriating now that so many VAR decisions, and not just in this game, by the way, but across the Premier League, referees are looking at it and just giving nonsense opinions on why they do or don't give decisions. I can't get my head around it.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. But at least we'll get a lovely letter from Howard Webb apologising and then explaining the reasons why it wasn't given. I'm just going to give a quick shout out to my dad, because I did ask him his viewpoints on VAR. And he said, it's working fine on the continent. It isn't the system, but the operators running it that are in the wrong. It is ruining the game when we have to check the officials before the team sheet to see how we will succeed in winning, which I thought was a very good point.
Yeah, and do you know what? When I've been abroad in recent months, I've watched games. When I was in Portugal during the summer, I watched games where it was used as well. And it just seems to work perfectly elsewhere. Champions League, you see it, and it works brilliantly. But for some reason, we can't get it right, and I don't know why that is. I don't know do our officials just not want to go against the on-field official? Is that element to it? Do they want to support their officials? We know they're a pretty tight group. I just, it's so frustrating, really is. And now we look at it, and it's just the impact that it's having and the money that it's costing clubs. And I know people say, these clubs earn hundreds of £1 million every year, but we know when it costs league positions, when you drop down the table, that costs millions. And decisions like this are costing. Look, we'll all sit here and say Newcastle United wasted a 2-goal lead and have a go about that and get frustrated about that. But the officials also played their part on Saturday, and they can't deny that. And that's why it becomes even more annoying and even more disappointing, probably more than anything else, more disappointing, that they have such a major impact on the game through nonsensical decision-making or the process of decision-making.
Yep, highly, highly frustrating. Just a reminder, this episode is sponsored by fpro.com, the football training mat that can pretty much fit in any space in the household and can be used outside. You'll get a football, you download their app, and you can take part in training drills designed by UEFA coaches, and it helps improve the concentration, the skill level of your budding footballers in your family. We've got a discounted offer in our podcast description box. Get ready for this, ladies and gents. Up to 60% off the fpro.com training mat. It is going to change your household, I would say. What a perfect Christmas present. I'm not sure you'll get it in time for Christmas if you do place an order, but soon after, and it'll be well worth the wait. So head over to fpro.com/EIBW20 to get your discount, or head over to fpro.com and take that discount code EIBW20 and get your product. Your kids will absolutely love it. Or if indeed you're an adult and won't think you can improve your five-a-side skills, why not sign up as well? We joked that Anthony Gordon could use one, and his performance, especially in that first half, I wouldn't be surprised if indeed he did sign up, hopefully using that discount as well. So there you go, fpro.com. Thanks for your support, guys. Do sign up and get yourself a wonderful Christmas present for your budding footballers in the household. Mark, and it is frustrating that we're talking about VR, that we're not talking about a fantastic performance by Newcastle United, back to the best, that we're not talking about some really top performances by the likes of Lewis Hall, Anthony Gordon, and Lewis Miley, that we are being distracted by the terrible decisions by the officials. That frustrates me no end. Let's, though, talk about that first half. Let's forget VAR for a moment. It was a blistering 45 minutes from Newcastle United. They pressed high, they had high intensity, and they moved the ball forward with pace and purpose. It was Newcastle United under Eddie Howe at their very best.
Yeah, and it's been a long time coming. You look, I mean, the last time I think I can remember a performance like that was the Carabao Cup final, and they looked as if they'd spotted a weakness in Chelsea's kind of defensive play, where maybe the defenders, barring Reece James, aren't as comfortable on the ball and really pressed high. Credit to Nick Vontemata, because he's taken a little bit of stick for not pressing high and not being able to, but I thought he led the line brilliantly on Saturday for the best part of the game. The wingers played their part as well, really, again, as you say, pressing high, putting the fullbacks under pressure, almost not allowing Chelsea's fullbacks to get forward. And we know that's kind of a big part of Enzo Maresca's game, is getting fullbacks forward and joining in and linking up with the player. But I thought Newcastle's wingers did a great job. We know the threat that they have in attacking areas, but again, to mention Lewis Miley and Lewis Hall, I thought arguably their best games for a long time, even given both have played very, very well throughout the season, or certainly in recent weeks as well. Just if I can just talk about Lewis Hall, actually, we shouldn't forget that he's not a natural left back. He's a midfielder. He came through at Chelsea as a centre midfielder, and the job Newcastle have done. And I know he did play at Chelsea as a left back briefly, but the job Newcastle have done to work on the defensive side of his game, because the attacking instincts are always going to be there through his midfield. Kind of the way he's been brought up as a midfielder. But I thought defensively, he's looking exceptional at the moment, and I always think he doesn't look the quickest, but you never really see him get outpaced or outthought or outmaneuvered in sort of defensive areas. I watched the thing last night on social media, a little video talking about England's World Cup squad, and I know we're not here to talk about that. But for me, if he continues this form, he's a shoe-in, not just to be in the squad, but to start. I think he's absolutely phenomenal, and I just hope he stays fit between now and the end of the season, because I think if he does, then he's got a real chance of going to the World Cup and starting. But yeah, going back to the original question, it has been a long time coming. I feel as if this performance, particularly in the first half, has been what's severely lacked in Newcastle so far this season, barring maybe the Liverpool game first half, or so for the best part of that game, I guess. I love the midfield sort of setting the tone by just going sort of 10 yards further forward, stepping onto Chelsea. I love Moises Caicedo. I think he's one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. But Newcastle were absolutely brilliant and swarmed all over him in and out of possession on Saturday. Just a great performance. The biggest annoyance, frustration, disappointment, whatever you want to call it, was that it wasn't rewarded with all 3 points as it should have been.
Yeah, massive boost to see Lewis Hall back in the starting 11. I mean, that's the kind of team news you want to read before kickoff, because it just boosts the fan base and you can kind of feel everyone rise up a level with that news. Lewis Miley, and you've talked about it in this show already, but I'm going to give you my thoughts on him now. Man of the match performance. He was the best player on that pitch. Garnacho didn't get any change out of him. And what I love is the fact that he's not diving in to the winger, because that's when you allow the wingers to get beyond you. But then when he wins the ball, he's just really controlled with it. He looks up. He doesn't just knock it forward. He just doesn't just knock it out into touch. He do that when it's necessary, but he can then start Newcastle United going forward. And we spoke about the confidence he had in the last game before the Chelsea game, to get forward and not to be tied down by the fact he had defensive duties. And we saw that again against Chelsea. He was just confident in his all-round game, and he was important going forward. But I thought defensively, where we maybe didn't see too much of that against Fulham, and this was a really big test. You can say what you like about Garnacho, and he's got a reputation that maybe isn't worthy of his performances so far in the Premier League, but he's still a very tricky winger. And Lewis Miley had him in his back pocket, really. It was a top performance from the lad.
Do you know there was one moment with Garnacho in the second half where he'd squared Lewis up on the left-hand side, sort of trying to break into the area? You make a really good point there about not diving in, because Lewis just kept him in front, and he kind of showed what I thought was remarkable patience not to dive in, because for whatever people think of Garnacho, he is a good player, and I know he has his detractors, but I think he is still a very good player. And what he tries to make defenders do is dive in, so you can either, if I'm being honest, you can either go down, or you can, certainly go past them with ease. But Lewis Miley just held off and held off and held off and made Garnacho make the first move, and then just eased him off the ball. When I say eased, I mean eased him off the ball, not like, Trevor Chalobah easing someone off the ball. Eased him off the ball, and then just played the ball out, and as if nothing fazed him. And I think that's what we're seeing with Lewis Miley now. We've seen it since he's come in the first team. Nothing phases the kid. He's such a level-headed lad from a family who are all the same. I always compare them to Owen Bailey, who was Newcastle 21's captain a few years back. His family gave him a really solid grounding. I get the same feeling from the Mileys. Just great to see him continue what's been a brilliant run of form. And I will say it, and I said it, and I said this during the summer. I think when we spoke about the academy, I still think the kid will play for England. I've got no doubt about that now. I think it might even be a right back, who knows? But I think he'll go on and play for England, because I think his development now, this little spell over the last 4 weeks, I think it's taken him to another level altogether.
Yeah, he's been absolutely brilliant, and he's going to remain in that position, you would think, towards the end of next month as well. So fingers crossed that form continues, and there's a lot of games to come as well. So we're going to need him at his very, very best. But what a start in that position from Lewis Miley. Sanchez Gnarly back in the starting 11, and you know me, I'm not a fan of saying someone is back or Newcastle United are back. It's only one game, but Sanchez Gnarly was looking like the Sanchez Gnarly of old. Especially in that first half, and even in the second half when things kind of went the wrong way for Newcastle United, he was still looking like the Tonali with that engine, with that energy, and he needs to build on that. We need to see that happen in a consistent run of games, but a good, strong footing from him in this game against Chelsea.
I think we've seen flashes of the Sandro Tonali we all know and love this season, but we haven't really seen a performance like this for a couple of months now. I will stick a caveat on that, and I think Eddie Howe spoke about this, that he has had an illness. We don't know what the illness was, but I think it was quite obvious that whatever it was, it's taken it out of him, and we didn't see the energy, we didn't see the work rate necessarily during that period. But I thought Saturday was the first time where I looked at Tonali and thought, I'll say it, I know you don't want it, but where I thought you are back to where we expect you to be. Again, I'll say it, and it is a big call, but when Sandro Tonali's at full flight and when he's in that sort of mood and in putting in that sort of performance, I don't think there's a Premier League midfielder I would take ahead of him. I really don't. I think, look, there's some outstanding midfielders in the Premier League, and I know that, but I think he ranks right at the very top of the list when he's in this sort of form. I hope it's the start point for a consistent run, because if it is, Newcastle United will move up the Premier League table very quickly. That's how key he is to setting the tone in midfield alongside Bruno. And he gave everything you would want from him on Saturday, and we need to see more of that in the second half of the season.
Certainly so. Nick Waldemar grabbed a brace, should have been a treble, as you mentioned. People are talking of a redemption story, but what a load of waffle. To those inside the Newcastle United family, there was nothing to make up for. The main thing I took away from his goals, and the one he should have scored, was the fact that he was getting service into the box. But more importantly, he was exactly where he needed to be. Now, there was a few examples, admittedly, in the first half where a couple of balls went in the box and he was nowhere to be seen. But look what happens when you give him the ball and he is switched on as a centre forward. That's what he can do, because there were two lovely finishes, to be fair.
There were really good finishes. I mean, the first one looks straightforward, but when you've got a defender on the line and he kind of had to hit it high, didn't he? He couldn't, if he's gone low, he's probably getting blocked. The second one, I think, is a great finish. It really is. The ball in from Gordon is exceptional, as good a cross as you'll see. And I was sitting watching the game with someone from Newcastle United, and I mentioned to them, if he gets too much on that, it probably goes into the keeper's hands. If he gets too little on it, it goes past the far post. He's just got the perfect weight on the touch, and it's a very subtle touch just to guide it inside the far corner. It's such a good finish. 100% should have had a hat-trick. I think it's he'll be kicking himself massively, because I think I'm right in saying he hasn't scored a career hat-trick. And I don't think he'll get a better chance than that one. Again, you make a good point. You can tell it's Christmas. I'm being really kind to you here, aren't I? But I look at the second half in particular. There were times when he's done everything in terms of getting the ball out wide, but then he's just hung back. There was one, I think he's played it out to Murphy possibly, and Murphy's looking to get across in the box, and Voldemort is still 30 yards from goal. And I was like, and I hate this comparison. I shouldn't make it, because but if that's a Shearer or a that sort of ilk striker, the ball goes out wide, and then his first thought is, I'm getting in that box because there's a cross coming in here. And that's maybe where he just has a little bit of work to do. But the talk of redemption stories is ridiculous. I mean, come on. Look at the amount of goals he scored this season for a striker we were told didn't score many goals. And the amount of headers that he scored for a striker that didn't score many headers, apparently. I think he has been a good signing. I do think there's a lot more to come from him. I'm still not 100% convinced that he's an out-and-out striker. But I'm looking forward to seeing, in the manner I spoke about with Lewis Hall, I'm looking forward to seeing what Eddie and his coaching staff can do with him.
Yeah, more to come from him. The half-time whistle came at the right time for Chelsea, because they were really up against it. Newcastle United were playing so well, and there was only one team looking like they were going to get another goal in that game, and Chelsea were starting to really lose their cool. There was a couple of examples of them surrounding their referee, a sense of entitlement, really. I can't remember who was down on the floor, but they wanted the ball put out. I think it was Cole Palmer, actually, after a challenge from Fabian Schär. Not a head injury. He's holding his foot, and Newcastle United go on to play and very nearly scored. I think it was that Voldemort chance, actually. And then Chelsea are fuming. And they were really starting to get a bit fiery and feisty, and getting the tempo was rising. When the halftime whistle went, I thought, that's going to be the saving grace for them, because they can get in. Notice how they all went in the tunnel together. They didn't go up separately, maybe to avoid a mirror flashpoint at half time. They got into the dressing room. They've clearly had a rocket from the manager, Maresca. I suppose on the other flip of the coin, you've got to ask what was said at half time in the Newcastle United dressing room, because they came out and was so flat for 20 minutes, really could not match the levels of intensity that they showed in the first half. And of course, it's the early goal, which doesn't help things. But that's all part and parcel of football. And that kind of leads into that key question of what happened at half time for Newcastle United. It was like flicking off a switch, wasn't it?
Well, I think this is the God, how many times have we said frustration in this episode, by the way? But this is the frustration with Newcastle United this season. It's the lack of consistency across games, but also the lack of consistency during games. Like when was the last time Newcastle put in a 90-minute performance in any competition? I genuinely think, again, I said it earlier, I think you could go back to the Carabao Cup final. It's been, look, I use this phrase all the time on here. It's tough to win games at the top level. It's tough to win games at Premier League level. Chelsea are a good side, and I know people think they're not because of the amount of money they spent, but they are a good side with some genuinely top-class players. But Newcastle had to keep their levels high throughout that second half. They had to, otherwise Chelsea were always going to come back into the game. Now, I think the first goal, I think it's debatable whether it's a free kick, but regardless, it's a brilliant free kick and nothing I didn't expect. The second goal, I don't think anyone should be battering Malik Chow, but it's unfortunate. It's a slip. He knows he should do better, but I think he's one of the players. For me, he's probably Newcastle's player of the season this season. So I think we give him a little bit of leeway. It's one mistake, one unfortunate error, and he'll be back. But yeah, I think that the tone was set, wasn't it? I think that would have made the difference if Newcastle had come out fit and firing at their best in Chelsea's faces for those first 15 minutes and managed the game. That's the key word. Managed the game until, I'll keep phrase, until the hour mark. They would have gone on to win that game, but they couldn't do that.
So what's the issue? Why couldn't they do that? Is it something that Eddie Howe's doing at half time? Is it something that the message that's being sent out, or is it the players thinking job done, or is it a bit of fear that they think what happened is going to happen, like it's some sort of inevitability?
I would find it difficult to believe that Eddie Howe's told the players to sit back and not get in Chelsea's faces, because I think you'd seen the benefits of that approach in the first half. So I'd find it hard to believe that Eddie had told them to sit back, and I would kind of hope that he hadn't done that. I think there's just maybe a lack of belief at the moment with Newcastle, a lack of confidence, and maybe that they know that they've wasted leads this season, that it's always at the back of their minds now, and it's that kind of mental barrier they've got to overcome, which we thought they'd done in midweek. We spoke about it on Thursday, didn't we, about that holding on to that lead against Fulham had maybe overcome that mental barrier. But I think the one positive I would take, despite dropping the points, when Chelsea got the second goal, Newcastle were able to go back through the gears. They were able to get themselves on the front foot again. And yes, Chelsea had chances, and Ramsdale's made a couple of saves that were decent saves, ones I would expect them to make, by the way. But Newcastle had chances as well, and I think that's the positive. I think in previous games, when they have been sort of pegged back by opposition, they don't seem to have been able to do that. They haven't gone through the levels again, whereas Saturday they did against a very good side.
Yeah, I think the free kick, it was soft, probably was a foul though. But I think what kind of summed up Newcastle's main weakness for me this season happened in the build-up to that free kick. And that was the fact that the midfield just stepped out and Chelsea were allowed to play in that space that I mentioned every single week. And it's frustrating because I don't want to keep mentioning it, but that's when Newcastle United are most vulnerable. And we saw that the midfield stepped out, their midfield managed to step in, and Ramsey and Bruno were left wanting, and then Ramsey obviously clips him. A lot of criticism for Aaron Ramsdale in terms of his positioning, because he'd gone over to the left and it was quite clear that Reece James was set up to curl it to his left. I mean, is that fair?
I think it's a difficult situation with Ramsdale and Pope, because I feel as if both have shortcomings, but at the same time, I feel as if there are some people just looking for points to pick with both of them. Should Ramsdale do better in the free kick? Maybe, but it's a great hit from James. I think you're right. The initial the start point probably isn't where it should be. But I think this again just goes back to what we've said many times, which is one of Newcastle's, and I know I'm throwing it right forward here, but one of Newcastle's priorities end of the season has to be a top class keeper. I think Pope's been brilliant for the club in this recent rise, but if they want to get to the next level, I'm not sure he's the goalkeeper to get them there. Ramsdale isn't either. So I think that's probably something. But yeah, I think it's an interesting one because we know Pope's close to coming back now, and it's left Eddie with a decision to make. But I think when you look at it on the face of it, Ramsdale maybe hasn't done too much wrong. I think the saves that he's making are saves you'd expect him to make. His distribution obviously is the big plus point that he has on Nick Pope. So it's kind of one of those where Eddie's got to decide once again what he wants to do. And it's a big call when Pope comes back.
I think Nick Pope will probably go into net. There was the disallowed goal Chelsea had in the first half. It was a clear handball, so that's why the referee ruled it out. But Ramsdale's positioning was very poor for that. He was far too over the other way. The second goal that Chelsea scored, he can do nothing about that. Some people have said he's too slow coming off his line. You know, there's a lot of space for Pedro to think about where he's going to put that chance. And I mean, it was my fault, really. I hold my hands up because when the ball goes up into the air, I shouted, "How's your touch, son?" And turns out his touch was all right. It was a great header, to be fair.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to jump on Malik Chow's back. You know, he's mistimed it. His decision making's poor, but I think it's actually a really good touch from Pedro to knock it behind him and run on. So no arguments with that. It's just one of those. You mentioned there, Barnes had the chance, probably the best chance of the second half, and everyone scored. Everyone thought it had gone in. I jumped out my seat. I was celebrating, and then we realised that he'd somehow missed. But again, that was a beautifully worked moment. You know, it comes from the right-hand side, and the ball into the box from Bruno is tremendous. And we didn't see too much of that in the second half, but that was Newcastle United, their flowing best, wasn't it?
Do you remember on Thursday I spoke about when you get Jacob Murphy putting all these crosses in, it's not just down to Nick Voltemada, it's down to the midfielders, it's down to whoever's playing the left-hand side to attack that back post. And that was one of the only times Bonds kind of did it when he came on, or Gordon had a couple of chances first off. And it was lovely to see that again, that we know what Jacob Murphy's going to do. He's going to get the ball at his feet. He's going to swing across in. It's down to Newcastle to be brave and commit players in the box. And yeah, I mean, look, I thought he'd scored, and I still think he should. It's a more difficult finish than people think, but I think he should have scored. I annoyed everyone at the under-21s game because I was kind of had the game, watching it on my laptop as well as watching their game, and sort of keeping an eye on both. And when he had that chance, I was similar to you, very unprofessionally, by the way. I've gone, what a goal that is. And about 4 or 5 people, I've scored, and it was Andrew Younger, who's the academy media manager at Newcastle. He just looked at me. He was like, "No, it hasn't gone in." So I had to apologise to the people in front of me, who looked very bemused and kind of bewildered as well. But yeah, I think there is again a positive to take from that Newcastle are creating chances again after games where they've struggled to do so. I think Jacob Murphy once again has shown why he is first choice right back. And then the other side, it's a really interesting choice now, isn't it? It's so interesting to see because we had a Gordon, arguably one of his best performances of the season in the first half, and then Bonds, who's been probably the better over the season in that position, coming on and doing well. And obviously, I assume we'll be discussing the incident with him later on as well. But yeah, it's nice to see certainly 3 of the 4 wingers looking as if they're in a bit of form.
Yeah, good to see Barnes coming off the bench and looking dangerous. I think he probably should take his first time, the one where Reece James eventually wipes him out. And of course, you mentioned there him running on through. He probably gets that if Reece James doesn't pull him back, which is just so frustrating. Again, that we're talking about decisions. Let's talk about some of the decisions that Eddie Howe made, especially in that second half. For me, Bruno, the last 20 minutes, was just down on his feet. And I know you don't want to take your captain off, but part of me thinks, do you just do it? Because he couldn't keep up with play. I think the only thing he did of note, a positive note, was that his involvement in that Barnes chance. But when Chelsea were going towards the Newcastle United goal, it was like he was running through cement. He was really, really struggling. I know it's a big call to take off your centre midfielder, your main man, your captain, but part of me thinks he should have done it and just taken the downgrading ability for the upgrade in energy that was clearly lacking from Bruno in those last 20 minutes. Not for want of trying. We know he's always putting 100% in, but he was clearly struggling to keep up with the pace of play.
I think this spell that Bruno's in, this first half of the season, is probably, in terms of consistency, the best level he's been at. I think he's hauled Newcastle through certain games this season, and I think that has taken a little bit of a toll. And that's not doubting his energy levels, commitment, anything like that. It is just sheer wear and tear. And I think maybe Eddie does need to be a little bit more canny and a little bit more acute when it comes to managing Bruno's workload, particularly over the next 2 weeks when games come thick and fast. I think there will be a need at some point for him possibly to be on the bench. Maybe at Burnley. Could you look at there, because you'd want Bruno in your side at Manchester United. Maybe could he drop to the bench against? A drop sounds harsh, doesn't it? Be rotated onto the bench at Burnley, and maybe give more responsibility to the likes of Sandro Tonali's and players like that. And we've got Joe Linton almost back fit now as well. So there's big calls to be made there. Once, and this is one of the big calls, by the way, once the fullbacks come back, what happens with Lewis Miley? Do they put him back into midfield? Which I arguably would say yes. But he's done nothing wrong to suggest that he should probably be playing it right back from now on. But I think the Bruno situation has to be managed really carefully by Eddie, because he don't want to burn him out. He's got if we're looking longer term, he's got a World Cup campaign to come with Brazil at the end of the season, so he's not going to get much of a break during the summer. And you really want him to come back next season fit and firing and leading hopefully a sort of more consistent Newcastle United. But I think you're right in terms of Saturday. I think that call should have been made just to give Newcastle a bit more energy in there. But I think, again, it goes back to trust. I think Eddie just trusts Bruno to try and see out games, but maybe he needs to take some authority with that now.
Well, you break the emergency glass on Joe Linton, don't you? He said he'd only be used in emergencies.
Yeah.
Well,
no, I think that's a valid point. If he's fit, if he's fit enough to be on the bench, then you would imagine he's fit enough to play at least 10, 15 minutes. But if not, then I don't really see why he's on the bench. But that's another matter altogether.
Before we finish on the topic of 13 points dropped from winning positions, Anthony Alanga comes off and he has a poor cameo. There's no getting away from that. And I'll caveat this every time I speak about him, and I'm going to offer a defense. I'm a huge fan. Buzzing he signed. I know people in the comments and listening will be saying, well, you were the one that was his biggest cheerleader. Not hiding away from that. The first thing I want to talk about is the chance he had to square it to Johan Wissa at the death. I would argue that Johan Wissa had the same opportunity to do that when he came off the bench against Burnley and decided to go for goal. These players, Johan Wissa and Anthony Alanga, for different reasons, are just trying to impress maybe a little bit too hard, and that can sometimes affect the decision making. Now, people have said to me, well, Newcastle still won against Burnley, so it's not the same. Well, it is the same, because Burnley nearly went and scored a goal, so we'd be having exactly the same conversation. My point being is that I think he's got every right to shoot there. He's trying to win the game for Newcastle United, and that's the point. He's trying his best for Newcastle United, and some of the reaction has been way over the top. You can be critical if it's constructive, but it's becoming abusive now. And at the end of the day, he's pulled on a black and white shirt. It's a big move. He's got that to get used to. He knows he's not being good enough. He knows he's got this massive price tag. Let's just support the lad through a really tough time, because he'll come out the other side shining. I've no doubt about that. I just think he needs that support more than anything right now.
I think it's desperation to get a goal, isn't it? And I think, honestly, if he does get that first goal, or when he gets it, I think you may see a different Anthony Alanga. We know what he can do because we've seen it at Forest. I do think there's a slight adjustment period now. It's maybe taking longer than expected, where he's gone from Forest, who are largely counter-attacking and relied heavily on his pace, to a Newcastle side that can control games and maybe do more in possession than Forest did. And maybe aren't as reliant on him, maybe he thrived off being the main man, but now he looks around him and goes, well, they've got, Bruno inside him, they've got Sandro Tonali, you've got another winger on the other side in Anthony Gordon and Harvey Barnes, you've got fullbacks who get forward. Maybe there is just an adjustment period to Newcastle, but look, there's no mistake, and he hasn't hit the heights anyone expected yet, and it has to be better. It does. It's simple as that. He's got to start living up to this price tag. If we're being brutally honest, this is the brutal nature of the Premier League. But I think there just needs to be just a little bit more patience. Hopefully over Christmas, maybe going back to his former club in at Manchester United might inspire him if he starts. I don't think he will. I think he'll stick with Jacob Murphy. But yeah, it'd be nice to see an improvement pretty quickly from Alanga because he's got all the attributes. We know the pace, the power. There was one moment, I can't remember if it was Saturday or the Fulham game, where he had the ball and he had a chance to drive at the defence, and he's just, how do I put this? He's just gone at half pace and been surrounded by 4 players that have crowded him out and stole the ball. And I just thought that, to me, just showed a little bit of lack of confidence, maybe a bit of anxiety as well. Just look, stick to what you do best. Stick to the basics. Use your pace. Knock the ball past the fullback. He's going to outpace 90% of fullbacks in this league. Get your crosses in and go back to doing the simple things that you did well at Forest. That's the way I would look at it.
What annoyed me about that moment that you're talking about, and it was Saturday against Chelsea. Literally 2 minutes later, Bruno Guimaraes did exactly the same thing.
Yeah, he did.
But the reactions were totally different. I know Bruno's the captain and he's won us the Carabao Cup and all of that. But come on, like, these lads are just trying the best for Newcastle United, and he is suffering from a lack of confidence. And look, I've got no problem with people critiquing his performance because, as you said, it's got to be better. He's not doing things right. He should have listened to the call if there was one and not allowed that man. Because that was the thing. He allowed 2 men to get on his back after having 10, 15 yards of space. That's annoying. That's frustrating. Maybe he should have passed it at Wissa. Okay, fine. Critique it. Be fine. But, you can sense it as soon as he gets the ball. There's jeers and some of the abuse on social media, it's been totally unwarranted. And at the end of the day, then he plays for Newcastle United and he's trying his goddamn best to be as good as he can be. So let's get behind the lad and hopefully we see the best of him. 13 points dropped from winning positions. That is alarming. That cannot go on, Mark. That has to change. Even with everything that went on with VAR, that's not good enough. However, do we say you can't place any of the blame on Eddie Howe here because he's gone with a game plan? If VAR had gone Newcastle United's way, they would have won that game by 2 or 3 goals potentially. Brilliant first half, back to the best. If we are saying that, if we are applying that, I think what I would say is that we have to see that first half performance over a long period of time, both in terms of 90 minutes in a game, but also against Manchester United, against Burnley, against Crystal Palace. We can't be sitting here in 4 games' time saying, well, the best first half performance or the best performance we've seen in Newcastle in recent weeks was against Chelsea just before Christmas. That's not good enough. So I don't think you can put any blame on Eddie Howe for what happened on Saturday in terms of dropping points from a winning position. But I will carry that. Like I say, let's see more of it.
But I think it's what Newcastle have done well this season for large parts. They haven't managed games, and that's in the dugout and on the pitch, by the way. They haven't, from Eddie's point of view, I don't think he's made effective changes in certain games. I'm not going to say every game, in certain games where points have been dropped. But at the same time, I also think the players on the pitch haven't managed those situations. They haven't made good decisions in key areas consistently enough throughout the season. And that's led to the opposition being able to get on top. It's led to the opposition being able to put them under pressure and eventually make them break. And I think that's where Newcastle, 100% in the coaching staff and the playing staff, must improve second half of the season. Is this game management, and it is a really sort of modern term that gets bandied around too much, to be honest. And I realise I'm doing it, but it's true. When they get themselves in front, I don't feel as if they manage the 10, 15 minutes afterwards. They allow the opposition to come on to them rather than just nullifying it and sort of keeping possession and really stopping the opposition building momentum. it gets even worse in sort of final 10 minutes of games. Saturday was a little bit different because Newcastle were kind of on the front foot in the last 10 minutes, which is why I think it was a positive. But I look at them and I think there's been times when, they've dropped more points than anyone in the final 10 minutes of games in terms of, conceding goals, whether it's equalisers or winning goals for the opposition. And that's not good enough. That to me smacks of concentration as well. There's just a little bit of a lack of concentration. Perhaps, and I hate saying this, but perhaps a little bit of a lack of leadership, or the more senior players getting around them, the rest of the team, and saying, right, we need to close in here, we need to do this, we need to do this. This is how we're going to set up. We're going to ride this game out. We're going to see it out. But I just don't think they've managed the game well enough in a whole host of games this season, which is proven by the stat that you gave before.
Yeah, well, hopefully that improves and Newcastle United can start turning some of these draws into wins, because they'd be well up the table if indeed they could do so. Starting with that game against Manchester United at Old Trafford on Boxing Day. Me and Mark will be back on Christmas Day with a special Newcastle United quiz. So get your pens and paper at the ready for that. If you're not joining us for that, we do wish you a Merry Christmas. We'll be back throughout the festive period because there's a lot of games to cover. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys very soon.